I'm Chloe.
I'm Tony.
And I'm Jorge.
And today we are talking to you about the classical time period for music, which is about 1750 to 1800. And at this time, instrumental music, which means strictly just instruments playing, was becoming more popular for audiences, and they were less intimidated by it. And we are specifically talking to you today about Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart and his Flute Concerto No. 1 in G major.
Great composer.
If you're wondering what a concerto is, it's a solo instrument that is featured in an orchestra. So in this case, the flute is the solo instrument. And we are going to be talking about the first movement, Allegro maestoso. Tony, would you explain to them what a movement is?
Movement is a separate piece of music within a whole musical score, basically. And there can be several different movements within one piece, or there could just be one movement and just be its own tune. But each movement is its own piece of music, and it can be a sad piece of music, it can be a happy piece of music, it could be fast, it could be slow, it could have a lot of rhythms in it, but I mean, it's all just one large piece of music, just all put together.
Telling a story, that's the main idea.
Yes.
So the theme will be kind of bounced around or add new themes, and then towards the end, all of them come together and have like a great ending to it, which is usually fast sometimes, but
depends.
Depends.
And in this piece, there are three movements, so three different ideas. And the one we are focusing on is the first movement, and that is called the Allegro maestoso, meaning majestic.
Allegro means fast.
Yeah,
But not too
moderate.
fast.
Yeah. So, in this time period, composers had a general outline or structure of how they made their piece. And this piece is in that structure called sonata form. And it was mainly used in the Baroque and Classical era. And sonata form is made up of three parts: the exposition, the development, and the recapitulation. And the exposition is the beginning, so that's where you will hear the main melody and the main theme. Jorge, would you mind playing for us the main melody of this song? Good. See, and that main melody will be featured throughout the entire movement / song. And that is in G major, meaning that there's one sharp, F sharp, to make up that key.
And there's different keys. There's, all from all the circle of fifths, but we don't talk about that today. But usually, back in the day, they used a lot of sharp keys to exemplify brightness or tone to the music. So, especially in G major, it gives me sort of like a yellowish color, brightish,
Happy
tone. So
happy tone.
Yeah.
And the next part is the development, which is where you'll hear the second melody, which is in D major. So D major, you're adding another sharp onto your F sharp. So F sharp and C sharp. And then finally, the recapitulation is the repeat of the main melody. Can we hear that one more time? And that is the main melody, but with few variations. So you hear that same melody, but it's a little different and a little more interesting to listen to. And this piece is very interesting because the flute usually plays something, and then the orchestra repeats it, or vice versa. The orchestra plays something, and then the flute repeats it. And so it gives it that nice push and pull between the orchestra and the flute as the featured soloist. And there are many important parts to this movement. There's passionate parts and, as we say, diva moments. And this is where there's crisp articulation and very pinpoint to the notes that you want to play. Jorge, can you play one of the parts with that shows articulation, very crisp and pointed notes?
Sure.
Good. So he's very clearly emphasizing each note that he plays. And then there's also some parts that flow more smoothly and sweetly and make a more beautiful musical line. Jorge, can you play?
Kind of messed up
Good.
a little bit.
That was
A little wrong
beautiful.
notes, but it's okay.
And you hear what they call ornamentations, so little things added to the notes to make it more interesting to the audience. And then finally, it ends with a cadenza, which basically means that he's adding, Mozart is adding some more variations to the main melody, but it's basically wrapping up the entire piece.
Well,
And-
I didn't mean to interrupt.
no, it's okay.
But a lot of the players even write their own condensas
Mm.
with the taste of what they feel like a condensa would sound to them. It's more like when classical kind of hits into the jazz world a little bit, and basically they're kind of improvising, but they memorize it and they write it down. But it's mostly a kind of an improvised type of little going, kind of restating the whole tune. So.
Mm. And so that is the basic sonata form and the musical analysis. Tony, would you like to talk about the different audiences that this piece was played for and the performers?
Sure. Well, these types of songs were written for public displays and public concerts, and they're also made to be performed in like smaller ensemble settings. Like
And what is that called?
It's called chamber music. It's very few musicians, maybe like 6, 7, 5, 4 musicians,
Mhm.
but you can play it in that type of settings, or it could be even in a recital setting,
Mm.
or it could just be even a solo setting with one person playing it, or it could with a symphony. But it can be played in many different types of settings. It's a public piece. I mean, it's just a really, it's made for the public. It's
Mm-hmm.
made for the public.
Especially in this time period, it was a new thing to have these public concerts,
Mhm.
and everybody can go and watch them. It's very interesting. And who was this piece written for?
It was made and requested by the flutist Ferdinand Dijon, but he was wealthy and he made an exception and just went ahead and just did this for him. Mozart went ahead and just wrote this for him.
Even
But-
though Mozart was not a big fan of the sound of the Baroque flute.
Yeah.
If he was alive today, he would probably love it.
Hmm.
So, all the flutists out there, it's okay.
And what kind of, what was the makeup of this piece, the performers that played it?
It was written for flute, 2 oboes, 2 horns, and string instruments like cellos and violas and violins and string basses. But back in like the Baroque era, like all of these instruments were different from how modern day instruments are like built and how they sound and everything. And it's sometimes you don't even have all the instrumentation, so it could be different. You can only have a couple of strings and maybe like a horn, but it's just how whoever writes it. But usually it's written for that setting.
Hmm. And there was a lot of scandal surrounding this piece. Mozart told Dijon that he would write him more music than he actually did, and there was a little bit of problem with, finishing it, and he basically lied to him and did not write all the music that Dijon had asked for. So Dijon only paid him a certain amount, and Mozart ended up making excuses because he didn't like the sound of that Baroque flute. Even though he didn't like the sound of the flute, he really did write this beautiful piece for it that a lot of people admire and are very pleased by, and it's very popular flute music. And so that's
Very popular.
interesting that even though he did not like it, it still was written very well. And
it's one of the top flute concertos played. Every flutist knows the melody, and it's a great piece of literature. You did a really well job writing.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's classical music.
That's classical music for you.
Thank you for
Thank you.
listening.
Thank you. And good night.